Quick note here at the outset. This video includes images and video of my injuries. There's no blood or anything. I just wanted to mention it. I will employ this trigger warning prior to any of said imagery. Clear on that? Okie dokie. If you're just joining us, you may want to check our previous video for context. If you have been following our trip to this point, you know that I took a tumble down these steps just as we were set to leave the Dead Sea for Petra on day 4 of our Jordan trip. The hotel nurse had taken a look at my ankle and advised that I needed x-rays. But first, I needed to get out of the room, down the stairs, and across campus to the main entrance. Enter my hero, Bilal. He arrived to collect me at around 11:30. Bilal's a pretty big dude, well over 6 feet tall and over 200 pounds, if I had to guess, but I am notoriously crappy at estimating such things. His helper was much smaller. Now, I was fine getting off the bed on my own, but walking was out of the question. So Bilal had me drape my arms across their shoulders and basically use them as crutches. The problem was that every time I lifted my good foot off the ground, the smaller guy would collapse a little bit, which made me nervous that he was going to drop me. This made for a comedy of errors, going down the 2 sets of stairs to his waiting golf cart. I can't tell you how relieved I was to see that little conveyance. When they first dispatched him to pick me up, I don't think anyone explained how jacked my ankle was. So he dropped us off at some tables here near the rear entrance of the main building and drove off to retrieve a wheelchair, which he then used to ferry me into the main lobby where we waited for MUHAMMED II. Once we saw him pull up outside, Bilal rolled me out the main entrance and headed for the wheelchair ramp. When MUHAMMED looked up, it took him a few seconds to register that it was me in the wheelchair. Gave him a little wave and his eyes got big. He jumped out and ran around to open the back door. Then he and Bilal helped me into the car. While they loaded our bags into the trunk, Wendy explained the situation to MUHAMMED, which is when I filmed the following clip. So MUHAMMED III is here, luckily, and he's very concerned. They're loading our bags now, and everybody at the Crown was wonderful, especially Bilal, our buddy. And they're loading up our bags, and now I guess we're gonna head to the hospital and get an x-ray and see what happens. By this point, we were behind schedule, and the drive to Petra is around 3.5 hours, much of it in the mountains. MUHAMMED spent a fair amount of the first hour on his phone. Now, this wasn't a complete surprise, as he'd been on the phone a bit the previous day too. I was pretty worried about how my injury was going to impact the rest of our trip. I mean, we still had more than 2 weeks left, and a lot of physical activity planned. So the idea of being in a cast for the rest of the trip was a big concern for me. Thankfully, as you also know if you've seen the Dead Sea video, Wendy is pretty unflappable, which was a big help during this ride. She kept me engaged by talking about anything and everything except for my ankle. One bit of unintentional comic relief on her part was while we were still heading south down the coast of the Dead Sea. Just to get an idea of how far south we had gone, Wendy pointed across the water and asked MUHAMMED, "Are we looking at Israel or Palestine over there right now?" To which MUHAMMED replied with a smile, "It's all Palestine." Which brought a cringy expression to both our faces, and she said, "Of course, a stupid question, I'm sorry." And he was like, "No, it's fine," and he laughed. Just because a couple European dudes drew some lines on a map during World War I doesn't mean everyone considers them to be actual borders. I covered this briefly in the Intro to Jordan video at the start of this series. Anyway, the ride was beautiful and mostly uneventful, other than a short section where the road had been washed away by a flash flood. There's a weird piece of trivia for you. An underappreciated risk in deserts is that of drowning, believe it or not. While rain is obviously an uncommon event, storms do happen. And when you dump that much water in such a short time on a poorly draining surfaces and into mountain passes, the risk of flooding is high. So it may sound silly, but you should still check the weather forecast prior to spending any significant time in canyons or wadis, where there's little opportunity to escape from flash floods. There's a great visual example of this in the Petra episode, which is next in the series. We could tell from road signs that we were getting close to Petra, but we were surprised when Muhammad pulled over outside this line of buildings. I've done a little exploring with Street View, and I think this is the spot, but I might be mistaken. Either way, he said, "Welcome to Petra," put the car in park and opened the door. In reality, we were in Wadi Musa, but there's no reason he would expect us to know the difference. He walked to a car parked ahead of us and talked to the driver through the window, who then got out and came back to the car. This was Mahmoud the First. Yep, I have to number the Mahmouds too. Suddenly, all of the time Muhammad had spent on the phone became clear. He'd been finding us a driver from the area who was available to take me to the hospital and eventually on to our hotel in Petra. Muhammad helped me transition from car to car, while Mahmoud got our bags into the trunk. It all went incredibly smooth, as though they'd done it 100 times before. From there, it was only around 15 minutes to Queen Rania Hospital, which is named for the current queen, who you can learn a little more about in the Intro to Jordan video. This hospital is not to be confused with the Queen Rania Al Abdullah Hospital for Children, which is in Amman, is much newer, larger, and fancier. This hospital sits all by itself on this hillside. I think it was originally built as a military hospital, which would explain its out-of-the-way location. Mahmoud parked right in front of the door. He went in, returned with a wheelchair, and we headed inside. Once again, our luck with guides was amazing. The receptionist didn't speak any English, or perhaps just didn't because she didn't need to, as Mahmoud did all my talking for me. From there, he pushed the wheelchair unerringly through the halls. He didn't stop and read signs or even hesitate. Next thing I knew, he had me parked outside of an x-ray suite and explained that the technician would be there soon. All of this, from the time we entered the hospital until waiting outside x-ray, had taken less than 10 minutes. At this point, I was joined by a fellow injured tourist. He was from the Netherlands and had hurt his hand during a fall at Petra. He was also with his guide, who had clearly been directing him through the process, as Mahmoud was doing for me. It was pretty apparent that injured clients is just another day at the office for these guys. Once it was established that I'd be there for a bit, Wendy left to use the bathroom, which was just down the hall. I only had a minute or so to chat with my new friend before the x-ray tech arrived. Now, I've spent more than my fair share of time in medical imaging facilities over the years, both for my own injuries and as a parent to a child with chronic medical issues, so x-ray protocols are nothing new to me. He took 2 views of my ankle in less time than it typically takes to get a cup of drip coffee at your local Starbucks. I was back out in the hall before Wendy was even back from the bathroom. She thought I was still waiting to go in at first. Mahmoud was also back by this time and wheeled me down a few doors and across the hall to what I would refer to as a cast room, but in a small hospital like this probably serves multiple purposes. After a few minutes, the doctor arrived, having seen my x-rays. I was somewhat relieved to learn that nothing was broken, but also unnerved to not know the extent of the soft tissue injury. I know from experience that this type of injury often takes longer to heal than a fracture and can cause chronic problems down the road. Now here it may seem like he's doing barely a perfunctory exam, but there's not much more that can be done at this point. Initially, he's pushing pretty hard, making sure there aren't areas of injury that I haven't noticed yet. Once he's getting closer to the clearly injured area, he's much more gentle, trying to see if he can judge the extent of the damage. There, right there. Yeah.
You will bend, okay?
Bandage?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, bandage.
No cast?
No need.
Okay, good. Can I walk on it?
No.
No. What?
No walking on it.
Now, I was unsure of whether I should record any video in the halls of the hospital. Not only did I not know what their policy was, but there was also a significant police presence, and I had no idea how they might react to being filmed. I finally decided to hit record as we were, I thought, leaving. This first clip is really short, so before I hit play, do you see this guy here on the right? That's one of the aforementioned cops. Now, I'm being pretty obvious about filming so as not to seem like I'm trying to hide it, and I'm also highly aware of his presence and anticipating him telling me to stop filming. So the moment he looks at me and opens his mouth, I hit the stop button. So the clip's like 3 seconds long. His English wasn't great, but it was pretty clear that he wanted us to follow him somewhere. So with MAHMOUD still at the helm, Officer 1 led us to a small office where there were 2 other officers at desks. They were very friendly and even moved some chairs to make room for the wheelchair. Cop number 1 sat down, took out some forms, and started asking questions. Initially, we talked directly, but eventually MAHMOUD jumped in to translate. It was kind of nerve-wracking at first because it felt like they were trying to find a discrepancy in my story or something. MAHMOUD must have sensed my discomfort because he leaned in and was like, "Don't worry, this is normal." I think these cops are tasked with keeping track of injuries in the area, especially those of tourists. Now, I don't know which force these guys were attached to, but Jordan does have a specific tourism police department, which even has a Twitter account. None of the patches on these guys' uniforms had the tourism police emblem though, so I'm guessing they were like sheriffs or state police. I was absolutely dying to get some of this on video, especially seeing that he was writing by hand in Arabic, which, in addition to obviously being visually very different from English, is also written from right to left. I, for one, had never seen someone do that before and thought you guys might like to see it. Now, I do want to be very clear. I wasn't afraid that they were going to throw me in jail for recording video. I just didn't want to be rude, and the middle of this interview didn't seem like the right time to ask, "Hey, do you mind if I record this for YouTube?" Soon enough, he was done with the report. And at this point, they thanked us for our patience, and all 3 of them stood up to shake my hand. I just had to get some kind of documentation of this experience. So I asked them if they would pose for a photo with me. They all agreed, and I had MAHMOUD join us too. Gave my phone to Wendy, and she immortalized the moment thusly. This is one of my favorite photos because it was overall such a positive experience when it could have been really awful. They were all very friendly, polite, and professional, and MAHMOUD, who had literally just met us an hour before, was a freaking rock star. His awesomeness isn't over yet either. From there, we finally headed for the exit. And it was at this point, Wendy and I started wondering out loud about whatever bill might be due. Did Jordan have national health care like some countries? We didn't know. Now, I know for some of you, the idea of walking out of the emergency room without paying a bill or signing a form promising to pay said bill is perfectly reasonable. but it's unheard of here in the US. We were pretty excited by the concept, I can tell you that. Once we were back in the car, oh, 1 second. Once we were back in the car, just as he was about to pull away from the curb, MAHMOUD reached back and handed me these 3 pieces of paper. They're invoices from the hospital that he had paid. I guess while we were in with the doctor. These 2 are for 18 dinar each, and this one is for 5 dinar. As of the time I'm recording this, I haven't had time to have them translated, but it's not that I haven't had time, I just haven't been able to find anybody to translate them. But I can guess as to the breakdown. 18 dinar for each x-ray and 5 for the bandage. That's my guess. Grand total of 41 dinar. US dollars, that's $57.80 at current exchange rates. You couldn't get an aspirin for that at an ER in the United States. Quick note, for those of you who might be wondering about travel insurance. Yes, we do carry it. We go through Divers Alert Network, or DAN. Their travel insurance covers medical, travel, baggage, and other assistance services, and there's 3 separate tiers to choose from. We usually go for the mid-range, which they call premium. This isn't the same as dive insurance, so you don't need to be a certified diver. To be honest, we get it more for things like flight cancellations and delays and lost baggage than in anticipation of needing medical care. As it happened, we didn't need it in this case, but it was really nice to know it was there. Anyway, MAHMOUD explained that he would just add the cost of the invoices to his bill and we could settle up that way. Super easy and efficient. 15 minutes or so later, we arrived at Petra Boutique Hotel, where we would be spending the following 2 nights. But that, as they say, is a story for another time. A little tumble down a short flight of stairs became dropping the proverbial pebble into the proverbial pond. Small initial splash, but ripples that extend for a long, long time. There are still 15 days to go in 4 distinct parts of Jordan: Petra, Wadi Rum, Aqaba, and Jerash. And as of this point in our story, it's been less than 8 hours since my fall. I really hope you're enjoying the journey so far. There's a lot more to come. So make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell to get notified whenever we post new content. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Petra.